Hello, hello, everybody.
Hello.
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 Hello. Hello. Hello,
Hello,
everyone.
hello, hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Hello, sweet.
Hello.
Hello,
Good to see
hello,
everybody. Wow, fantastic.
Hello.
There's 150 people already. Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know I could fit so many people in my sitting room.
I
live
see
in
Luz.
line, live in line.
Hello, Luz Carmen.
Dice hola, Luz. Dile hola, Robert.
Hola, Luz.
Hello again.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, Robert. Nice to see you.
Hello, hello, Eduardo.
Hello.
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 Привет. Hello.
Hello.
Monica.
Hello.
Hi,
Wow.
beautiful family.
Yes.
Hey, Robert and
Love you
Steven.
so much, Oksana.
Hello.
Hola.
Hello.
Hello, Steve from Chile. Steve. Hi. Hi. Hola. Hola, Steve. So happy to see you again.
Hola. Everybody from Latin America.
Yeah.
We might want to do a little muting as we get ready to start here. So, wow, fantastic to see you all. Remember, we do have interpreting. So if you go to the interpreting channel, and select which language, if you want to listen, we have 6 wonderful interpreters this afternoon, this evening, this morning, wherever we are. So we're really excited. We had I think a good first session. And how many of you were at this first session? Do you know how to raise your hands? You're on the.
You've got your physical hand with your
But you also there, I like, yes. So welcome back. Welcome back. There we are. Well, lots of hands coming now. Fantastic. So, we want to first say welcome back to everybody. Welcome to the ones who are just joining us. Actually, if we put our hands down for a moment, let's go the other way and find out who all wasn't at our first session, and this is your first session. How many of you, raise your hand if this is your first session? Hello, Maxine. Hi, Mickey. Hello, hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, Laura. I see those joining us that were not here in the first session. In our first session today, we were going into a generative state. We did our coach state, we set an intention and connected to our resources so that we could really move forward and get the best out of the program, the conference. And this evening and morning and afternoon, wherever we are, we want to, in the second session, kind of be a little bit more interactive with you, with the presenters as well. So we're going to just do a little bit of a brief opening here. And Stephen and I each have, as usual, we have our readings to start with. And
did that conclude all the acknowledgements, Robert?
well, what we might do is, for the acknowledgements, I'd like to ask everybody except for our sponsors and our partners to close your, to stop your video for just a moment. So Anybody who's not a partner or a sponsor.
So we just want us, the sponsors and the partners up on the screen. So
Yes.
just temporarily, please close your cameras if you're not in those communities.
Yeah. So if you're not a partner or a sponsor, just turn off your camera temporarily. So turn off your camera if you're not a partner or a sponsor. And I just want to then acknowledge some of our sponsors and our partners. So we have Natalie Labov, Chrysalis, we have Alistair, and from our Japanese partner, we have Richard and Oksana Connor, who are a Russian partner, Blanca, one of our Spanish partners, Danielle Oil from Argentina, Michael Aime from Repair here. We have Till Neunhofler, and let's see, I'm trying to see who else are. Let's see. We have some of our Spanish partners. Raise your hand if you're a partner and I haven't called your name. All right, I think that's most of us then. And I also
Mindset maps.
Mindset Maps. Mickey, there he is. Mickey's also a presenter. I do also really just want to take a moment and acknowledge our organizers here who have really stepped up. You know, we had a big challenge when Vanessa Burde, who was really the kind of the one that had been taking this from the beginning, for health reasons couldn't continue. And I just want to acknowledge that Jean-Francois Thierry and Elizabeth Falcon and Jonathan Goldsmith really just stepped up and are responsible for really making us have this level of success, which is really fantastic. We have over 200 people on right now, and we had 240 in our first session. So this is really, and we're from all over the world. So I just want to say thank you to those, especially, and of course, there's others who have been involved in, you know, spreading this out. I want to, you know, call out Kamna Provost, who's also done a lot on our social media and made sure that, you know, we're all informed. So really great. Last group, I'd also like to just acknowledge right up front here, and maybe we can all turn off our cameras except for the interpreters.
Thank you to all of you.
Yeah. Who are just, maybe if everyone turns off your camera except for the interpreters. We can see our great interpreters. There's Deborah, that's one. And Toki, wave, maybe you guys can raise your hand, wave your hands. There's Toki, it's our Farsi interpreter. Ekaterina, it's one of our Russian interpreters, and Dmitry is our other one. And we have Guillermo, where's Guillermo? There he is, and Graciela, our Spanish interpreters. So welcome to all of you. And thank you for really, you know, being willing to make our voices heard in so many different languages. So now we can ask you all to turn back on your cameras if you want. We can get our community, back here. And I see we do also have our presenters. Maybe there's probably going to be a little too many to see all at once, but I want to just honor and thank our presenters who've been doing a great job. Anyone else you can think of to acknowledge, Steve?
No, I can't, Robert. I think you covered all the important bases. If we did leave out somebody, we apologize.
Yeah.
But I think you covered it.
Yeah. So one of the things that Stephen and I wanted to do in this plenary is to sort of address some key issues relating to generative change, and especially generative change in our challenging times.
So the way we were thinking of pursuing this is we asked each other to identify on our list of the most important core principles or processes of generative change for today's time, what would be on your top 3 list? And to bring a little bit of mystery, Robert and I did not show each other our respective lists, so it'll be interesting in that regard. Will be for me anyway. So we are going to alternate, and we'll each talk for 8 minutes or so about a single particular topic, and we might have a little conversation between us as we move to the other person speaking from their list, and so forth. And so we hope to have that done within an hour and then open it, because really our vision of IGC is not a group that is autocratically run by DILTS and Gilligan. Our vision is to create the next generation of teachers and developers and practitioners of generative change. So this community that we come together with on the international meeting is really to open a space for a lot of different voices. So we'll talk for about an hour in our plenary, and then we'll open to other voices as well. So you might be thinking, in your work with generative change, if somebody were to ask you, what are the 3, would you say, most helpful or most generative or most relevant dimensions of generative change that you think really can make a difference? What would those be? So that's what Robert and I were going to talk to.
Yeah, and maybe we can begin with our readings. I have mine. I can go ahead and go first, I guess.
Go ahead, Robert. Yeah.
So as usual, I'm going to draw upon one of my favorite poets who has been with us in other generative change conferences, Nick LaForce, who's also a colleague. And
is Nick here, by the way?
I have not seen Nick. Don't know if Nick is here.
Natalie is shaking her head.
Yeah.
So he's here in spirit always.
He's definitely here in spirit. And to me, this, our theme for this conference is generative change, generative future. And I think this whole idea of really bringing our focus, a creative focus to the future, is an important part of what we want to all be doing at this conference and joining together in doing that. So this poem is about that. And it's titled, Look Beyond Yourself. And so Nick says, look beyond yourself. The keys to your heart's desire lie beyond the eyes and the ears that you hold against the world and cannot be claimed even with the writings of all the wrongs you have suffered in your life. The past is not a path to fulfillment. Your history is for lessons, not for life. Passion lives in the present and in the future, now waiting to deliver your deepest wish. And I just think this is a big part of what we want to be doing here in this conference is look to that future. What is that future that is wanting to be created through us? So this idea of our passion, really lies here where we are now and where we're going, and kind of trying to hold on to the past or replicate the past is more or less the opposite of what we mean by generative, because there's nothing generative about doing what we've already done. So I think this notion and this idea of, standing, strongly in the present, but looking to that quantum world of possibilities in the future is a big part of what we want to be all doing together in this conference.
Over to me.
Yeah.
So it's okay with you, Robert. I'm going to use my reading just to lead into the first point I'm going to make, because I think it follows well. I had my poems yesterday, even all the way through dinner. And then I went to my last conscious act of the day, my California hot tub in the backyard. And that's usually where, from the mists of Avalon, all these new things came up. So I changed my reading because I think it is indisputable. We live in the best of times and we live in the worst of times. There is so much destruction and dissembling and decay that is occurring at this point in time in the world. It's frightening. Robert and I are 66 years old. We grew up in San Francisco area through the heart of the 1960s. And so we've been through intensity a few times, but I have never experienced such an intense time. Everything is falling apart. So is that the good news or the bad news? Well, it's bad news if we don't find a way to grow a generative consciousness, to receive it and hold it and engage with it. And I think that's what we see in the growing tides of fascism, in the growing tides of one group fighting another group, the chaos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's good news when we recognize that this is supposed to happen. One of the things that we emphasize in generative change, usually when people come to see us as practitioners, it's because they're in some deep fundamental identity transformation. So the way they had been living their lives is no longer possible, and they haven't yet arrived at their next level, their next step of their identity. So they're in this betwixt and between state where either symptoms and violence happen or create a breakthrough. So that's, how we see generative conversations as holding this place to welcome things as they are, but to support things so they can transform into a higher level. So the reading I have is actually from one of the people that I was inspired by way back in the early days. He's the French Jesuit priest Teilhard de Chardin. I hope I got the French right. Natalie, is that correct?
Nearly correct.
Okay, so my institute was called the Omega Institute, which was his term for this place of what he calls centered complexity, from which this next level of consciousness is able to develop from. So I thought that as an opening, I would just read to you a few short passages. And this is actually from a book by an American writer. Her name is Shelley Joye, J-O-Y-E. And I've really been into her, but she writes all these different books about people that I'm most excited about these days in terms of a generative future, like David Bohm and Paul Prudhomme and Jean Gebser and Teilhard de Chardin and Henry Bergson, who had the creative evolution. Really quite amazing how she puts it all together. So here's several just very brief passages. And this is about Teilhard de Chardin, who, by the way, was a Jesuit priest, but he was also a trained scientist. He had a PhD from the Sorbonne in Paris. He was a paleontologist. He spent World War I, 4 years of World War I as a stretcher carrier, somebody without arms who was on the front lines. He survived for 4 years. Just anybody was hurt, he would carry them to safety. Then he came back and started talking about some of his ideas, some of which he realized in the middle of war. And the church was not happy with him, so they shipped him out to China so he wouldn't corrupt the young priests in Paris. And he was there for 10 years doing digging in ruins and looking at theories of evolution. And from that, he evolved this theory of evolution that really emphasized the simultaneous evolution of a material and a spiritual consciousness. So really, from the very get-go, he was bridging in this scientific, mystical, artistic language what we really think of as the generative journey, which is everything is infused with the living spirit. Everything has consciousness in it, and consciousness is trying to wake up. And so here's what something that Shelley Joy is talking about. She says, Shelley Joy, in words that parallel David Bohm's description of an ongoing process of enfolding and unfolding between an implicate and an explicate order of the universe, Teilhard de Chardin describes, quote, the inward furling from which consciousness is born around the center, the all becoming self-reflective, self-aware upon a single consciousness. Teilhard says, to become super conscious, what we call generative, the fragmented building blocks of man must unite itself with others, but without losing personalities previously acquired, without losing information. Recall that Teilhard had sensed this phenomenon as a totalization of multiple centers of consciousness in 1916 at the front of the war. Totalization means that everything is unified. He goes on to state that humans in general seem to have lost the, quote, faculty of totalization, the capacity to feel the underlying wholeness and undivided wholeness of everything, with the exception of a few mystics who have been able to experience union by dissolution, much as salt in the ocean. But it is union by differentiation that interests Teilhard, not union by dissolution. So in other words, a lot of times when we talk about a generative field, it's like you let go of everything else. You let go of all the distinctions. And he's saying, no, no, no. You actually include that differentiation. It's a vital part of what he calls the centered complexity of awakening. We can see a justification ahead for our hope of a personal immortality without becoming confused with one another. To complete ourselves, we must pass into a greater consciousness than ourselves. In this convergent universe, all of the lower centers unite, but by inclusion with a more powerful center. Therefore, they're all preserved and completed by joining together. Is that great or what? Is that great or what? I mean, I think to me, that's such a beautiful description of what we mean by a generative field. So my top three: generative field, generative identity, and generative intention. Okay? And so just a few words about generative field. We emphasize a lot the notion of a field in generative change. And a lot of times people say, what do you mean by a field? Well, you probably remember at some point, we've drawn these two circles, a little circle, which is the explicit, which is the form, which is the content, which is what we're consciously experiencing, and then a big circle, which is the context, which is the space in which it is being held. That space in which these patterns are being held, that's the field. So all fields are not generative. If we use, for example, Joseph Campbell's description of three life paths, the villager, the wastelander, and the hero's journey, the villager version of the field would be basically bureaucracy. You know, so you grow up, you go to school, you pay attention to your parents, you go to work, it's boring work, you go through the motions, and then you die. Okay? That's done in a field. There is a text for that field. There's a deep structure. But the field in those situations is not supporting life. It's not holding this sort of loving, dancing consciousness that allows you to be the best of who you are. So that's the field. I was just teaching in Japan the last 2 weekends on the hero's journey, and I was asking them to identify a Japanese hero's journey and talking about the generative field of Japanese consciousness. And a number of people said, understandably, most of them women, when I think about the Japanese culture, I don't think generative. I think there's a lot of harshness or a lot of blaming or a lot of misogyny in it. So all fields are not created equal. So we have these bureaucratic fields in which we're sort of held into place by habits of what we should do. We also have these wastelander fields in which we're overwhelmed by violence or suffering, or we're sort of lost in dissociation. This occurs not only individually, it occurs even deeper collectively. I'm from an Irish culture where I was born into fields of depression and alcoholism. I'm an American. I was born into a field of intense racism, where by the color of somebody's skin, they can be violated. We'll talk about that in the next session. We are born in a world where women are regarded as second-class citizens, and you know, it was only a few years ago that all states in the United States made it illegal, it was possible to be charged with raping your wife. It's fairly recent in some states. So it was believed, since your wife is your private property, on a legal basis, you could never rape her. Okay? That is a dark field. Okay, so there are fields and there are fields. So what we're interested in is, what's a generative field? What is this place of open presence that extends beyond all people, places, and things? And this open presence that could be able to welcome, to be able not only to hold and give sanctuary, but to be able to touch with loving kindness and curiosity and intelligence every member of that field, so that it can be able to realize its positive nature, its positive intention, its best form, its sense of belonging and connection with all the other parts of the field. There's a lot to be said about that, but that's my number one on the list, is that we, especially today, need to master this notion of a generative field. And there's no fixed way. It's got no content. It's not a state of just thinking positive thoughts. On the contrary, it's a place where you can equally hold in terrible shadow and light at the same time. It's what allows transformation. So I think if we're going to make any contributions to our clients and to the larger community, this is something that we have to really deeply cultivate, find ways to support people in finding them themselves, and talk about it as an integral part of creating generative communities. Okay, Robert.
We probably are going to have to start putting on timers, because we're already half an hour into it. So, but for me, maybe not surprisingly, my number one is a kind of a complement to that. I think in order to be able to accomplish that, my number one is basically where we always start with any session, which is coach state, but in particular, really coming into our bodies somatically. I think one of the things that is characteristic of what's happened to us as a planet, we can see it in the the violation of our environment, and those kind of things, that there's a lack of deep connection. So for me, starts with a sense of connection. In particular, it's got to begin at home in the body. And in some ways, maybe rather than even just talking about that, I'd like to invite us, if you can, maybe to stand with me, and because to show, well, what is it that I think is important? I think that sort of like you could have two different movements. One is sort of back and down. So down, back into the center, sort of like, I kind of use this metaphor sometimes of sitting on the dragon tail, or, a kangaroo tail, that we've got to come to the body. We've got to be centered here in the present, because the sort of the opposite of that, the complement of that is going up and out. And you might just try that, maybe stand this way. There's, this is one kind of movement, back and down. The other is up and out. And when you go up and out, very often what's happening is you're losing that sense of a grounded somatic center. That's why we always say in the generative work, we want to extend from the center. If you just kind of go up and out, you lose your balance. And for me, I know that in the challenges that I've faced in this last year, that capability to come back in and really ground in the somatic intelligence is really key. So that sense of, oftentimes, in the coaching work that I'm doing, we'll have these four really important signals. One is slow down, and maybe you can join me in this. Slow down. And as you slow down, you're beginning to bring an awareness, kind of moving from the head into the body. And the second is pause. And pause is just this moment of stillness, of silence, where I can kind of reconnect into myself, but also into this sort of bigger wisdom. The third is breathe. And in breathing, we're opening. But again, it's an interesting kind of opening. Instead of the up and out, it's the sort of coming up from the ground. And then center. So to me, kind of one of the most important principles is that. And it comes kind of, again, from the body. Slow down. Pause. Breathe. And center. And then from this place, there's a place of being able to listen, to really connect in. There's a deeper wisdom. We sometimes talk about, the mind beyond the mind. And to be able to do that, we have to get our filters. And I think this is maybe another way of saying, for me, that first most important principle is, I've got to get my filters in the right state. Because, again, there's going to be many, many fields, like Steve was saying, and my filters have got to be set so that I'm not going to be taken away by those dark fields he was talking about. And the only way I know to really stay and be able to select in these types of fields that Steve was talking about, of racism, of misogyny, of depression, of other things, is I've got to really come home back to this place, ground into the earth. And then from there, we can open out. So again, you might just join me. There's this difference, a difference between going up and out and being grounded and really extending from that place. And I know, again, and for so many times just in these past, months, that has been, my saving grace. is, you know, when everything is, you know, chaotic and it's changing and it's uncertain, come back here. And then, you know, I was mentioning that in the poem from Nick LaForce, then I can start to look beyond myself. But Nick says something important there. He says your deepest passion is in the present first, and then the future, waiting to deliver your deepest desire. So we've got to always start here in the present, get those filters grounded, get those filters in a place where they can actually filter through the darkness and find the light that is there, find the color that is there. So that would be my first one. So this idea of, you know, always coming back to coach, to center, to coming in the present, in this place, and from there I can open out. I think that complements what Steve was saying.
Yeah. And, there goes my linear list.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's so many things I would want to rip off of what Robert was just sharing, and I completely resonate with what he's saying. Probably most of you have done in the generative change workshops this coach exercise of the 3 mindfulness drops, where we sense what we call the 3 minds of generative change. The body mind, always first, developmentally, the verbal cognitive mind, and the mind of our field. And we talk about generativity as awakening a body of bodies, or a mind of minds, or a field of fields. And at first glance, that might sound very esoteric, but it's really very, very practical. It's, you know, what I hear from what Robert's saying is about that sense of, okay, I've got my body. Now, does my representation of my body involve is it sort of a single muscle-bound literality, my body, like an ego extension? If that's it, I'm not going to be able to be generative. So when we drop into center, it's moving from a neuromuscular lock language. Let's see, there's my body. Now I'll do this to my body or whatever. We're moving to this deeper type of intelligence, which is nerve awareness or chi flow. Okay? And in that chi flow, there is an undivided wholeness to everything in our world. Breath is the most important part. Our mind is inside of our breath. So when we attune with our breath and we're centering to our body, we start to feel our body as a body of light that has 10,000 possible bodies. And again, I hope that doesn't sound too weird, but that's where we do change work. You know, if somebody comes in, they say, oh, I feel terrible about my body. I'm like, I have a food addiction, or I have chronic pain. If we just talk to the verbal mind about the body, it won't be able to initiate any change. So what we want in the conversation is to open this conversational consciousness where the body is felt to be sort of a shimmering body of light, if you will. And I can feel inside my body a 3-year-old body. I can feel a 10,000-year-old body. I can feel a connection where my body's felt pleasure. I can feel a connection. So the generative field it's what we were getting out and talking about it as a quantum field. It's a place that has 10,000 different faces to everything. And the language that's needed for that is this subtle chi flow sort of language. The other thing I'll just add briefly is the second point as generative mind. The question is, who, as my father used to say in his drunken rages, who the hell do you think you are? From a muscle-locked, isolated ego consciousness, we usually have a single representational map And our map is that we're one part of the system and not all the other parts of the system. So I'm Steve, I'm this guy over here, and you all out in the field, you're not me. Okay? This leads to tremendous pathology, tremendous suffering, tremendous, what Bateson called epistemological errors. So the generative identity or the generative mind is what I would call a community of mind. And really our 6 steps of generative change is about welcoming the community of mind. So there's a part of you that has an intention, welcome. There's a part of you that has a present state, welcome. There's a part of you that experiences resources, welcome. There's a part of you that really is overwhelmed by obstacles or has representations of obstacles, welcome. One of the central points of a generative change conversation is to open this generative field where every part of the system, every player is welcome. And the capacity to hold multiple contradictions simultaneously is one of the definitions of a creative mind. It's not just arts, but if you look at the creativity research, you see that on and on and on. So that's the second thing I think we have to look upon. You are a community of mind. You are everything in the world that you can see. It's also part of you. And so we're interested in holding the self as a community rather than the self as an isolated individual. That's my second one, Robert.
Yeah, I think that's great, and it's interesting too, because I think it's a nice, also a nice complement to what would be my second one. And so I think this idea that we really need to be able to hold all of the different parts of the whole on. And I think that sort of understanding and welcoming, and I don't mean understanding cognitively, but that sort of knowing and welcoming all those different aspects is so important. My second is it's going to be an interesting complement to that, because mine has to do with the idea of really keeping the connection between the somatic center and the intention. So I think in these times that we are experiencing now, it's so easy to get distracted, to let go of that future orientation. Now again, if that future orientation is towards a content, what's happening in the world right now is going to just be terrible for it, because you have uncertainty, things change. Nothing is going to come out exactly the way you thought it was going to when you started. But that sense of a direction is really important. And again, I'd like to sort of go over my part here a little bit more somatically, just because I know from spending so much time in front of Zooms, it's actually much more useful to kind of engage the body a bit more. So maybe you stand up and join me, and I have a couple of different ways I'd like to express this importance of the second part. One is a metaphor that we use a lot in our generative coaching work that I think really it's a way that I hold in my body this principle. So it's not just cognitive understanding. And so there's two things. One is this sort of the metaphor we use of an archer. And actually, when I was younger, I really enjoyed archery. I was actually quite good at it. And when you're an archer, you're holding a bow out in front of you. So you might want to like grab your bow, and then you're pulling the string towards you. So you've got this very interesting complementary movement. One is pointing out, and one is coming back, so that I'm kind of this connection to my center. And then I can really feel that sense of a direction. And to me, it's that motion that is so important. If I just do this one, I get lost. If I only have this one, I'm stuck in one place. And there's this beautiful sense of a creative tension there. Now, again, another interesting metaphor of the bow is depending upon how far you're trying to, hit the target, I'm going to have to lift it more. So there's also this kind of very interesting motion of how high do I aim? So for me, this kind of like this movement is a really important one for me, because it's that extending out and extending and staying here. Now, to me, there's a second sort of a somatic metaphor I'd like to just also bring into that, which is another thing that I really enjoyed. Actually, right around the time that I was first getting started in NLP at UC Santa Cruz, I was learning fencing, where you have an epee, a sword. And to me, there's an interesting thing there. When you hold a sword, and especially an epee, you're wanting to, the tip always has a direction, and you can move that. So one of the ways, I'm going to show you a kind of a fencing stance. The way you do it is you've got to, you put your one foot is pointed perpendicular to your body, and the other one is pointed forward. And then you're kind of like all good martial arts, you always start in this place of a center. So you kind of bend the knees, you get in that center. And then now if you think about this tip of your sword as your intention, and you're going to be, when you're doing it, there's a lot of mobility, because there's a whole range there in front of you. It's not just one thing. It's not a fixed point. You're moving it. And key part is the way you hold that sword. So if we think of the sword as the intention, if I hold it too tight, I'm really stuck. If I hold it too loose, it's going to fall out. So there's this place of really being in the center, and you're always moving the arm, and you might just want to feel that. Move your arm
losing your head, Robert. We're losing your head.
Yeah. So I was kind of just trying to show, because then you'll lose the bottom part, which is, but what you're trying to do is because it's a little bit more, you don't need to see my head for the moment, because it's a little bit more, what you're trying to do is, I want to extend that intention out from the center, not move my arm around, but every movement is coming from the center. And you might just try that and kind of put one hand on your center, your belly center, and just kind of get that feel that if I was always moving my hand with that connection to the center, what would that be like? And again, holding it not too tight, not too loose. And then I can really extend out. So that's sort of my second principle there, is really that sense of never losing connection to that intention, not grabbing on one particular form of how it should be. Stephen and I have, in the whole development of IAGC, that's been kind of an ongoing thing. The form, the concrete form of it keeps changing and evolving, but our intention has I think always stayed constant of what it is that we want to create. And then, certain forms of it fall away, disintegrate, and then something new comes. And I was just thinking, the fact that we have, right now we have almost 240 participants. We had 240 this morning, this first session. This is twice the number we had last year at our conference. And it seems to me there's something here that is still a fruit of this intention that really I could not have anticipated. A month ago, even 2 months ago, I could not have anticipated that this level of this wonderful gathering. So to me, that's my second one.
I think I have to throw away my notes. I would just refer back to those brief comments I made about that TRD Chardin, talking about what today people like Gebser call an integral consciousness, where every individual is unique and freely expressed and realized. But he goes on to say that every individual is feeling their own center, which is beneath all the form and beneath all the content. I am. And that individual local center makes you a unique, necessary presence for any sort of generative growth in our community. We can only grow if we have what Pierre de Chardin called centered complexity, which means everybody has to celebrate and experience their uniqueness. And then he goes on to say that in that generative self is that every individual is feeling their own center, but is also feeling the heartbeat of a deeper center. It's like you feel this sense of I am me and I am we. And to me, that's where we are. That's the great threshold where we are in the world. We are moving from this long chapter of an isolated ego consciousness. Some would say it's 500 years back to the age of the Enlightenment. Some would say, no, it's much further back, maybe 3,000 years. But it's a long time that we've been operating in this mode of consciousness of an isolated ego that doesn't feel its body, that doesn't feel nature in a direct way, doesn't feel others. And we have wreaked havoc with it, and we are at the end stage with it. So to go forward, we need not only this to feel our true home is this generative field. You know, we belong to something deeper and bigger than ourselves. Our true self is a community of mind in which everybody in our community is part of our mind. And by the way that we practically realize this in a generative change session is we're really noticing where there's crashes, where there's stuck points. So we say, okay, let's start with your intention to say, well, I want to be able to be more successful and bring my message out in the world. We say, great. And often we'll see within a matter of seconds that there's some sort of lock or block that occurs, which to us marks, oh, here's another part of the community of mind that's equally important to include. So we're thinking of in terms of, I want to be seen, and another part says, I don't. And so we have the beginning of a multiplicity of a community of mind. When we hit stuck places where it feels like, I don't know, we go into a relaxed state, and usually we say, let something come to you. Let a part of your consciousness that is not right now in this conversation, let it join us. So this notion of resources, that resource is another member at the table of the community of mind. Now, when we put those together, this third and final core distinction, I think, for generative change, particularly at this time in this place, is generative intention. Generative intention, again, remember Pierre de Chardin, going into a generative state is not abandoning or dissolving your individual self. Au contraire, it's actually fully living and fully being your unique self and extending beyond that in a way that you realize that you have a gift to give to the community. So generative intention means my deepest intention is to create something that is satisfying for me that can be of value to the community as a whole. And we see that all over the place. I mean, I met Viktor Frankl, you know, in his extraordinary book, Man's Search for Meaning, talking about how he survived in Auschwitz. And he said, you know, the people who were able to find their resilience generally were people that were able to claim their own personal meaning to their life and didn't let the situation define it for them. And then he said, you know, he said, when I was in Auschwitz, I'd never asked, what do I want today? He said, for that context, that's a ridiculous question because nobody cared what Viktor Frankl wanted. So I really was holding the question, what is life asking of me today? And from that question, I was able to find meaningful answers that allowed me to really feel a creative human being, even amidst those situations. Some of you, many of you probably know the theory of you by Otto Scharmer and Peter Senge. And I think of the theory of you as a cousin to generative change work. And in the, you know, the left side of the letter U, it's an emptying out process of letting go of your ego identity, letting go of your group identity. And then at the bottom of the U, you're emptied out. So then the group can be holding this question. What is it that the world is asking of us right now? What positive contribution can we make to the world? And then the right side of the U is about slowly being able to develop a way of fulfilling that intention or that need through careful practice and creative exploration. The basic vow in most Buddhism is, may what I do here be of value to all sentient beings. That's generative intention. We are at a place where if intention is primarily at ego satisfaction, we will rip the world apart until nobody can live in. We have reached the end of ego fulfillment being a sustainable, viable intention. So we, I believe, as a generative change community, need to be able to sense it's possible to live your life in service of something bigger than yourself. There are examples of that. There are many ways to do that. We can be able to communicate that to our clients and to the world. We can be a model for that. We can develop ways to support others in doing that. So I say that to all three of these: generative field, generative self or identity as a community of mind, generative intention of living one's life in service of something deeper than yourself. Okay, that's my third, Robert.
Great, fantastic. My third is sort of going to be an interesting complement to that.
Surprise.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. So when I was coming up with my third, I was really kind of reflecting on what's been going on and what kind of things that have been going on in our world and in the United States in the last several weeks. There's been mass shootings right now. There's the trial of the murder of George Floyd. There was another young Black person killed by a police officer,
20 miles from where that trial was being held.
And when I look at these kind of the things that human beings are capable of, we're capable of this incredible generativity. We're also capable of incredible violence to each other. And one of the interesting questions is about what, for me, that's important to hold is, are these people that commit these acts, are they just bad people? And for me, I don't think anybody is born evil. Nobody's born bad. So how is it, and what kind of field, and how is it that people come to those types of actions? and so my third has to do with this whole area, of course, of obstacles. So yes, we have our coach state, we have our intentions, we have all our resources, but there's this whole thing of obstacles. And I think one of the potential even blind spots in generative change work is being generative to escape from our own difficult feelings. In this whole idea of really being able to come and I think when we project, often we project them out onto others. We try to escape from them in lots of different ways. But I mean, and I say this knowing from in my own journey, I think I'm being generative. I think, oh yeah, I can hold all my difficult feelings, except for the ones that I can't. And those are the ones that I'm avoiding so deeply, I don't even know that they're there, because it would be like falling into a black pit. It's the stuff that those people do, the ones that are doing all the bad things. So for me, I guess my principle is that really being willing to own, to look deeply into what are those difficult feelings that I am not really welcoming yet. And it's so easy because, as you know, Stephen, as you were saying, we live in a field where that's not supported. That's everything is set up to avoid that. Everything is set up to quickly move on to something else, to take drugs. I remember a few years ago reading this thing where the biggest leap in sales, at least in the United States, were two different things. One was antidepressants and the other was guns. And you think, what does that mean? What is that coming from? I've got to have guns because there's the evil, the fear, everything I'm projecting out from me. I need to have the antidepressants because I can't be with my own feelings in response to it. So for me, I guess the principle would be something like this, that when I look out and as I look to that future, of course, and I want to see a better world, I also need to start by really letting myself fully feel how I do react to what is happening, to what is. Because if I don't really let all of that through, if I don't feel the sadness, if I don't feel the despair, if I don't feel the frustration, if I don't feel the rage, then whatever that new world is that I'm trying to create is probably just going to bring more of that into it. And I think it goes along in a way, Steve, with your principle of really, welcoming the whole on.
Yeah.
But it does mean that it's not just a superficial welcoming. It's that really letting at times my heart be broken, letting myself really experience what is happening. Sometimes that may even mean that I'm gonna have to crash. And I think the sort of demonization of crash is probably, we know that that's not part of our principle. And yet I think so often, as you've said before, that we think of coach state as being, a nice, happy, friendly state. Everything is always nice and good in a coach state. When actually you can be in coach and have your heart broken. You can be in coach and, feel that sense of despair. And so I think that to me is an important principle, that if we are going to be creating truly a new and a more sustainable future, we've also got to have the courage to really keep looking and welcoming, the difficult feelings, and not just try to immediately go away from them. So that's what I would say is my third, that being with what's there.
Maybe we just summarize with a sort of a back and forth single statement of the 6 principles, and then we'll open the conversation.
Yeah.
So we say to you all, cultivate open generative fields.
And we say to you all, cultivate a deeply grounded connection to somatic intelligence.
We say to you all, sense yourself as a community of mind, multiple contradictory parts, and to find harmony together.
And we say to you all, really keep that connection to the intention and that connection of the intention to your deepest self. Keep that connection for your attention to your deepest self.
And we say to you all, create a great life for yourself, but above all, be of service to the community.
And we say to you all, really hold all of the experience, what Carlos Castaneda's Don Juan called the wonder and the horror of being human. And really holding all of that as part of our own humanity.
Thanks for the conversation, Robert. Oh, what is this?
This is one of Antonio's.
Did Antonio, did you do that this morning?
Just now. Hello.
Did Robert, did you introduce Antonio earlier?
Huh?
Did you introduce Antonio?
No, well, yeah, we did this. We did actually. You're right. We did this the first session, but let's. I think this is a good opportunity to say a big thank you to Antonio.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jean-François, for sure.
I don't know. I imagine you shared with the community that we're coming out with Generative Coaching Volume 1 this week.
I actually was waiting till you got here to say that, and we can even maybe Antonio, do you have the cover there right away? Right.
Antonio is the illustrator.
Yeah, in a second.
All the layout. So this book, Generative Coaching 1, Robert, how many books have you published?
It's kind of gotten beyond what I can count. It's at least 27 or something.
Yeah, and Antonio can be my witness. Robert said, I think this is the best book I've ever done.
That's right.
Right? And a big piece is Antonio's extraordinary, just fucking amazing. So you want to show a few things, Antonio?
I'll show the cover that I have right here.
Okay.
Let me see. Sharing is paused. Okay, 1 second. I'll try again. Oh.
And if you can't, Antonio, I can get it. Maybe I'll even.
Let's see. Now let me tell me if you can
there
see
it is.
this.
Oh.
So you got the cover and the back cover over here. World premiere for you to take a quick look at this.
And I can tell everybody that book has just gone in. It will probably, before the conference is over, it will probably be available on Amazon.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you, Antonio, so much for being such a generative contributor to this project.
Thank you.
So did you have a few drawings from today?
Yeah, I've been sharing them in the WhatsApp, but Jean-François was just sharing, so maybe he can.
Oh, that was Jean-François.
Again. Yeah. So
maybe we can share the ones that I'd be curious. JF, do you have the ones, Antonio's drawings from this?
Yeah, there they are.
Number one.
Celebrate your uniqueness.
Not too tight, not too. I like the little yin yang in the belly.
Yeah.
Community of mind.
All right, 10,000 possibilities.
Pour avoir le premier sur l'unicité, s'il vous plaît.
Slow down, pause, breathe, center.
Oh, dommage.
Look
Beyond yourself.
Very cool.
Beautiful.
Ok. Ah, le voilà. Mhm.
Wow.
And then
Christiel, you may
there's,
want to mute yourself.
just to everybody, I'm sharing these drawings in the Generative Field WhatsApp group, so you can find them there. And I think I will create a Google document with a link that we can share with all of you so that you can find them all in the end,
Yeah.
the collection.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thank
So
you.
I was thinking, Steve, that might be interesting to get to see if any of our presenters had a comment that they, or a question, something they'd like to add.
Great, great.
Starting.
And
Yeah.
for this, since we have 19 minutes, we'll ask you to keep it succinct, 2 minutes at the very longest. So,
anything any of our presenters would like to share, or any questions that people have, anything that we want to bring out in this plenary. And it's going to be best, Jonathan will be our MC, and you're going to need to use, how to raise your hand if you go down to the reactions button at the bottom, and there's a little thing that says raise hand. Like I'll raise my
Jonathan, are
hand.
you here?
I'm having some computer difficulties, so Jean-Francois is going to be the MC.
Okay, great.
I just thought since Jonathan's been working for 7 days straight, you never know. Okay, Jean-Francois.
And somebody else had their hand up that went down. I think Danielle has his hand up, and somebody else did.
The reaction is not working. I'm raising my hand in the reaction, but it's not showing.
All right, go ahead, Dan.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Daniel from Buenos Aires. One thing that has been very important when practicing generative change for me is keeping the relationship between the holon that I am and the bigger holon I'm being part of. And in the session from it, has been always crucial for the person who is really trying to go forward, to come back to this relationship between, okay, I'm a holon and I can feel myself as a whole, but if I'm a standalone whole, then I'm nothing. So I have to keep connected with the bigger holon I'm being part of, and sometimes just getting that for me, belonging is not a concept, it's a felt sense in the body. So unless we can feel our belonging to a bigger holon, there's no hope. We will keep suffering because the root of suffering is the feeling of separation. But if I try to understand this holon thing as a concept, and this belonging to a bigger holon as a concept, not as a felt sense in the body, then it's close to nothing. So for me, that's one of the key points.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. I agree with you. Absolutely. Layla, you have your hand there.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you, Robert, Steve. Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to say that it makes...
You can introduce yourself, Layla.
Yes, I'm Layla. I'm based in Paris. And I just wanted to say that it makes so much sense, and it's all very fractal. It makes so much sense to connect back to the body and go back into a coach state, because that's what we do with our client as well when we are kind of lost. And it makes so much sense to connect more to the field, and you know how like people say, they start saying the world is complex. It has always been complex, but as you were saying, we were just living from this mind here. And now as it's starting to shift, everything is chaotic. And that's when we use it. We need to use this work more. And I just wanted to share that I feel it very much. And it's I don't know, it's just the more I get to know the work, the more sense it makes, and the more alive I feel, and the more I can share it with as many people as I can. And it's really unfolding with the obstacles and holding the multiple difficulties, and it's actually beautiful when you come to think about it.
Yeah.
It's just what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Leila. I think your point about, to me, one of the really touched me when you said that when you're really doing this work, the feeling of being more alive is probably a good guide. It lets you know, oh yeah, then I'm really doing it. Because I know that's been one of the great benefits for me. Thank you. Julian.
Julian.
Yeah, I was really touched by your third point, Robert.
Sorry, John.
Which was about welcoming the feelings which I'm not welcoming yet. And such a strong feeling about, particularly what we're doing environmentally, but all the other things as well. But some of the other things, how the police work and stuff like that, we can change. But some of the environmental things may be impossible to change. We may go past the tipping point. And I really am glad that you talked about, that we can be heartbroken in crash state, or in coach state. We can be heartbroken in coach state. That a part of really not avoiding, but looking into the reality of what's happening environmentally, and feeling how hopeless I feel anyway about the impact that I could make as an individual, and feeling all of that, and yet then still deciding to have an intention. And to sort of really welcome those, those feelings of despair about it all, and yet at the same time, rather than just crash, actually, rather than freeze, or any of those, or distract, or any of the things that I could do, to actually have some intention and some action around it. So I was really glad to hear you include that in coach state.
The late Christian mystic monk Thomas Merton used to call that effective suffering. Effective suffering. He used to say, I did not become a monk to suffer more than other people, but to suffer more effectively than other people. And so it's the suffering and the heartbreak that opens you, I think, to a deeper field and a deeper presence.
Yes. Thank you, Julian.
Nice apartment, Julian.
JF, go ahead and choose our next one.
Yeah, it should be Till.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Till. I live in Neunhöfer. You did very well on that one, Robert. Stories about problems with my last name in the English tongue are many. I live in Mainz, Germany, and I can absolutely follow with the ideas, especially with having several identities that need to come together. So I'm a physicist, I'm a mediator, I'm a martial artist, and all of them kind of need to get together. The point that I would like to make today is that the things that might sound esoteric out there aren't, and it's our mission to make them normal. So I want to share a story. I was kind of forced or tricked by a friend into giving a seminar with business people using a wooden sword. It's not the screen not big enough. And I was afraid to tell people, well, this is a very normal instrument to use. But hey, here I am in a beautiful monastery with 10 people from the business world doing sword work. And then we practiced, drawing, cutting, shaking the blood off, putting it away, the whole thing that sounds weird if you're not used to sword work. And then I told them, set an intention and say it out loud, and then set the intention and cut with a sword, walking forward while you say it. And then we closed the session, and then the boss of this whole endeavor, he's the boss of 400 people, took me to the side, well, not really to the side because it was not a secret conversation. And he said, in very basic German language, he said, I took this intention and then I started hitting with a sword and I realized it was the wrong intention and I changed it and then everything was good.
Wow.
And there was such an intense revelation to me that if I just go through with what I believe in is what we need to do, embodiment and generativity, and then just carry it out to the leaders in the world and do it with them as if it were normal, it becomes normal, and then they can reap the fruits of that. So my invitation is take this example and overcome any resentments that you have to take this to normal or other people. Just live it and do it and take them into the current of this work that needs to be done.
Well said, Tim. Thank you. Well said.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Who's next, Jeff?
So next one is Evelina. Evelina, yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. It's been really, really nice to reconnect with everyone again and to be part of this field. And I wanted to build on a
Evelina, introduce yourself first, though, because not everybody does know you.
Yes, I'm Evelina. My session as well will be on Saturday morning as well, so I'm looking forward to it. I wanted to build on the message that Julian already started, and it's building on the fact that we need to include all of the pain into our coach state. And I'm working as a mental health coach and organizational well-being consultant, and I know that from my experience, all the biggest obstacles and everything that we are trying to change and we cannot comes from the fact that we are not accepting that first. And that has to start from within, accepting that within ourselves and looking at certain things that maybe we don't like or we hate, or there is a conflict somewhere that is perceived in external world, looking to recognize that within us and how it reconnects with us internally, and learning to accept that first. And the world can only be changed inside out, starting from us, accepting our own identity and evolving it into the better versions of ourselves. So thank you so much for moving on that.
Thank you, Evelina. And Evelina, where are you talking to us from?
I'm from London, but I'm originally from Lithuania. So.
From Lithuania, but from London. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have now Natalia.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, what Evelyn is talking about is what we would consider one of the unique dimensions of generative change, which is the welcoming and connection to the obstacles and the suffering and the pain as an integral part of the solution. We say, like in first generation change work, it was all focused on the past and on trauma and on suffering. But it was thought of as this unchangeable sort of a block of suffering. And so then coaching and humanistic psychology said, no, let's just focus on positivity and the future and resources. And we see that as equally one-sided. So what is carried in the suffering and what is carried in the symptoms are the deepest parts of the soul. And they appear as problems only because the human connection to them has been negative. So a big focus of generative change is what it means to have this positive, skillful, careful engagement with the suffering so that it begins to reveal its human value and its human resources. Thank you. Okay.
Natalia.
Natalia.
You have to unmute yourself, Natalia.
Всем добрый день. Я очень счастлива вас видеть, быть здесь.
Lung.
Меня зовут Наталья Князева. Я работаю с докторами. Есть звук?
So I'm going to be repeating what Natalia is saying so that everybody.
What, you guys can't hear Dimitri?
Дмитрий, вы меня переводите?
So Natalia's saying she's Natalia, that she's working with doctors.
Дмитрий
Я могу
переводит, да.
говорить?
Да, Наташа, Дмитрий переводит тебя на русском канале слышно.
Когда я задаю им вопрос, почему они пришли в эту профессию,
And when she says, when I ask doctors the question, why did you come to this profession?
они отвечают, что они хотели помогать людям.
They say that they wanted to help other people.
Мне очень нравится теория, что лучшее, что может сделать человек в этой жизни, это помочь другим.
And I really like that the best thing that a person can do in this life is to help others.
Я благодарю за то, что сегодня говорится о концепции «Проживи прекрасную жизнь, принося пользу людям». Thank you very much.
I really want to thank you for bringing this up, this notion of this precious life of using our life to help others. And she's saying thank you.
And, you know, and I would just briefly add, we really emphasize to generatively and sustainably be of value to others, you first must help and realize your own individual life. You can't bypass yourself. Okay, who's next?
Now we have Oksana.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you, Stephen and Robert, for beautiful presentation. And thank you, everyone, for being here in this beautiful community of creative, generative minds. And I just would like to emphasize how important this idea about positive connections. I'm here kind of speaking from all our Russian branch of conference. People are here too from Russia.
How many?
And how many? We had about, yesterday we had 93 participants in the conference.
Wow.
Right now, I'm sure it's more. And
Wow,
we have
fantastic.
28 master classes in Russian language. And also we have, and that's how I'm leading to generative connections. We have 10 master classes, this conference translated into English. So we are really welcome on all English speakers, participants to attend our master classes in Russian with English translation. And believe me, our translators' English is much better than mine. So first of all, I really would like to thank you for all these connections, Stephen and Robert, and for everything you bring to this planet about how important to be really nonviolent, to connect with each other. And this idea of creative nonviolence and communication in all different spheres, for me, it's really touching and also humanizing, because that's how we become humans. And I just, right now we have 4 days beautiful journey in front of us, but right now I just really would like to thank you, two of you, Stephen and Robert, for bringing these beautiful connections to the world, because right now we all who've been not connected at all 5 years ago, right now we know each other. And yeah, IGC is evolving, it's different stages, different developments, but we have these connections, and we have all of us together. So from me, from Russia with love. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we might have time, because I know we don't want to, on a conference like this, we don't want to go over too long because there's other master classes to follow. We might have time for one more, I think.
So it was Olivier. Olivier was next.
Okay, thank you. I'm Olivier Deterno, so I'm from Switzerland, and I'll be guiding 2 meditation, one next tomorrow in French and one on Sunday in English. What I wanted to quickly share is the notion of service. I recently read in a book, and that was almost repeated throughout the book, a book from Paul Selig, like a mantra: I know who I am, I know what I am, I know how I serve. And for me, one of the big shifts that I see first in my life, but also that I like to see around, is this change of perspective from how I can take something from this world to how I can serve. And that changed for me a lot of things, because from the start, so it puts the grain and the elements that drives all the activities that we do and that we will find back along the way. And that's the start, a little bit of the same when we talk about the intention. But this notion of service is basically really touching me very much, and I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Olivier.
Nice to see it.
I think this, for me, there's also something that's very profound about it, because when we have a sense of a mission, we connect to something bigger. It's almost as if we have superpowers too. I mean, it empowers you in a way that just working from your own ego never could. So I think it's a really interesting thing that service also, it serves me, and I think that's very important. So thank you.
I would again just note, because I think it's really crucial in terms of the threshold we're on, that we appreciate service to community starts with self-awakening. It starts through really realizing I have been given this incredible, unique gift of human life. I have to fully be able to be with it and let my wings open. And that is the basis for a really deep contribution to the community. So we've been in this, polarity. Is it more important to care for yourself, or is it more important to care for others? And at the generative threshold, all those places where we have either or questions, we realize that those are not generative questions. So.
By the way, maybe even also as a kind of a closing poem, I saw that somebody posted in the chat one of my favorite Rabindranath Tagore quotes, where he said, "I slept and I dreamt that life was joy, and I awoke and I saw that life was service, and I served and I discovered that service was joy." So maybe that's a good way to kind of round this up. I know there's others who had their hands up, but I do think we need to wrap up so we can move on to our other plenaries. I just want to just say welcome and thank you to all of you. Big thank you to our interpreters. I'm sure we gave you challenges along the way, but big thank you. And of course to Jonathan, Jean-Francois, and Elizabeth for being our MCs and helping to get this together here.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, in 15 minutes or 20 minutes, I'm going to be in this panel, or I can't remember what they're called, but we've been doing this really, for me, an amazing community on ending racism. And we're going to talk about that in the next panel. So hope to see you there.
Great. All right, everybody. And I'll see you in the plenary tomorrow morning with some of our panel about generative change in business and what we've been doing to bring generative change more into business. So look forward to seeing you all then.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Merci beaucoup.
Спасибо.
Bye-bye. Muchas gracias. Bye-bye.
Gracias, everybody.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Shalom. Gracias.
Gracias, bye.
Hasta luego.
Gracias.
Arigato.
Hola, Sergio. Thank you all.
Bye.
Gracias.
Спасибо.
Gracias.
Chao.
Muchas
Chao, chao.
Bye, everyone. Love you.
Itabu.
Thank you very much.
Love you
Bye.
too.
Thank you very much. Obrigado.
Muchas gracias.
Vamos, Argentina.
Gracias. Saludos a todos.
Gracias.
Argentina.
Bye bye. Viva, viva Chile.
¡Viva Chile!
Okay, Julia, nice new apartment. Looks big. Your mic is off.
Thank you, Rob.